Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Do you love animals and want to make a real difference? At the Animal Alliance, we believe that no cat or dog should be euthanized due to overpopulation. Our solution is simple: spay and neuter. Visit theanimalalliance.org to see how you can help us create a future where every pet has a chance at life. Join our mission today at theanimalalliance.org. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show. And today I get the honor of having a great friend on the show. We've been friends back on and off we met, I think, on social media probably 3 or 4 years ago. It feels that long at least. I don't know, maybe it was sooner, but when you have a good friend, it feels like you've known him for a long time. So it's hard to know how long you've actually been friends. But Ty Shane, he has the most incredible journey story. One of my favorites as far as transformations go and how he's processed it, how he's come out on the other end, and kind of who he's become in the process of becoming. And he's not done. He's still chasing, further development, pushing himself, getting himself in uncomfortable situations, doing everything he can to really explore the essence of who he is as a being and who he can become in the creation of his new being, which is, phenomenal. He has a wonderful set of skills that I'm excited for him to share with you. If you're a business, or maybe you just want to have a bigger impact, you don't have to be making money with the skills, but he's probably going to help you make money if that's what you want. That's his goal. But Ty, tell the story of just your childhood. How did you grow up? How did you get to where you are today? Because it's been a lot that you've gone through. But yeah, don't hold anything back. Share it as real and raw as it happened.
So let's just say, if you don't know, ages 1 to 4 are the most, pivotal years in your neurological development. And so at 13 years old, when, most children or preteens are in school, my birth mom was pushing me out. And so that was just a whole, how can I say this? Victims of victims, or how do I say this? Victims of victim. I was basically on the path of becoming a victim of a victim. There we go. And so birth dad, he was a creep. He committed suicide when I was 2 months old. When I was born, because it was her stepdad, her mom abandoned her and blamed her for everything. And so she just repeated the cycles that she knew based on the traumas that she had experienced. And so at about a little after 4 years old, taken away by DCFS and went into foster care, and then adopted at 6. And as children, we cannot fathom, we cannot analyze, we absolutely have no comprehension of the realities of the world. And so, if you've read the 4 Agreements, we basically build all these internal identities and beliefs based on our childhood experiences and external influences that we're basically left to unravel the entire rest of our life. And so, how do I say this? Abandonment, being forsaken. For example, I have forsaken on my knuckles. That was a part of my identity. And so being adopted, definitely my parents had no idea what they were in for. And I'm grateful for the ignorance, but one of my future causes is to better prepare parents who want to adopt, especially with children that are older at around my age of 6, on what to expect, how to handle it, just based on my experiences with my parents and what they didn't know, and how some more information might have just made their life easier, might have been better for me as an adopted child, et cetera, et cetera. So, great home, LDS family, great family values. And so I started getting the drugs My grandpa died when I was 12, and it kind of started something in me clicked and triggered, and I started acting out at a rate that I never had before. And I got into drugs at about 15, very lightly, just drinking, smoking weed. Went to a group home from 15 to 17. And that's where I learned about the real drugs. So, put a rebellious child in an environment, I'm getting educated. I'm like, what? Ecstasy? I'm like, cocaine? Like, what is this stuff? I didn't even know this stuff existed. I was in this small little baby world. And so that sadly, definitely, piqued some rebellious curiosities. Ended up, so I got my diploma at 16. I was working full time, my first time out of the group home at 16, and ended up coming back out on my own at 17. My parents would just say, anyone watching this, has an adopted family member or knows someone with an adopted child, it's just not, unless they're babies, generally speaking, they're coming with a lot of baggage, and there's a lot of traumas. There's just a lot of wiring that comes pre-configured that you cannot undo. And so, like I'll say it to anyone who's going to adopt a child, love is not enough. And so that's the first fallacy that you must, go into adoption with. And I'm not speaking to babies, but to children who are in foster care for a reason based on prior events and experiences. And so at 19, ended up getting into hard drugs. That's just how do I say this? You smoke weed, and it's good when you're around with people who smoke weed, but what happens is there are people who smoke weed and do other things. And so you end up kind of, I don't know if the right word is converging, but you end up overlapping in these other kind of ecosystems. My friends were, doing meth one time, and I want to know what they were doing, and curiosity and all that stuff. Needless to say, I drained my bank account on a weekend. And it started out as a weekend thing, turned into a daily thing. And next thing I know, I had a federal indictment. So it went down fast. I mean, it was about 8 months. So 8 months from starting meth to federal indictment. So it was fast. It was fast. Needless to say, I got a real, I got an insight. How to say it? I got my perspective of the justice system is based on experiences and things I've witnessed from the federal system to the state system to the county system. I've been to over a dozen incarceral facilities. I've been to I've touched point 3 federal facilities. And then I've been in 2 state prisons. And then I've been into a whole bunch of county jails. And so I went through the federal system. I ended up going through the state system. And I went through, the county systems that lead up into those bigger systems. And so I have a pretty thorough experience. So that feeds into my passions today. But needless to say, I'm saying a lot. Needless to say, how do I say this? There's power in your falls, and there's power in your mistakes. And so through those times, I didn't see it, didn't understand it. My prefrontal cortex wasn't developed as well. So if you're male, average age is about 25. Prefrontal cortex is decision and logic making. My last time arrested for stupid drug-related crimes was 24. That's no coincidence. That's related to prefrontal cortex. And so that was just the whole journey from 19 to 20 to almost 28. I was only free for just under a year cumulatively. Like I would get out for 14 days, get locked back up because I would start using. My longest out at once over that period of time was only like 3 months and 3 weeks. But that was one time, and all the other times were less than 60 days. So I absolutely could not stay sober. I absolutely could not stay out of trouble. And if anyone struggled with addiction, had a family member with addiction, you just sit there watching like, what the heck is he doing? What is she doing? Like, this makes no sense. Like, you just had this great opportunity. You had everything you needed, but you're back in jail. You're back hooked on drugs, and you lose everything. And so you kind of become addicted in a sense to starting over. You become used to starting over. And so that was, basically most of my 20s. I got out. Finally, I did my longest stint at once, which was 3.5 years. And so that was at Utah State Prison for $1,000 theft. It's a whole other story. It's garbage. It's dumb. But God works in all things and God turns all bad for good. And so now I find gratitude in my experiences because the only reason I am who I am today is because of those. And so anybody who's listening or watching, your greatest transformation is probably premised in pain and bad decisions. And so we tend to listen, enough is enough. You're in a bad relationship. At some point, you have a breaking point, and you go off onto something else, and you make a decision that you couldn't make, the countless times before. And so, basically, after being out for about a year, I was relapsed back on drugs. At this point, IV drug user. So that became part of my drug addiction as well. So let's just say this, the slope is a lot slicker when you get to basically like the purest form of drug addiction. Like it doesn't get any worse than that. And so about to get my car repoed, I was like, oh crap, my car gets repoed. I'm hooked on drugs. My phone just got shut off. Like this is not going to bode well for me. Like there's only one direction I'm going to go unless I do something drastic. And so just like 6 months earlier, I had been reintroduced to my birth mom. And that was a nerve-wracking experience, but we got reconnected. She was across the country. And so I just one night, I up and left, filled up my car, literally had $13 to my name. And I just left Utah, went up to Park City, hit Wyoming, basically went a straight line to Kentucky. That's a whole story itself. That's where I built confidence in myself. And then afterwards, I saw God's hand in it because it's just like in business. You start something, you're going somewhere, and you don't know how you're gonna get to the destination. You can't even necessarily see the destination, and you sure as hell probably don't have the resources to get to your destination, but you go anyways and you start. And so one of my favorite things is God knows our hearts and He directs our steps. And so that was kind of that's definitely embedded in that experience. So I'd go to Walmart's, download offline maps. I would do these little crowdsourcing audit apps. So I would take basically it was Monster Energy drink single-handedly got me across the country to meet my birth mom because there was something going on between them and Walmart's. And so I just go and take pictures of all the inventory of Monster Energy drinks at Walmart's, and I get paid like $8 to $14 per Walmart. And that's what I used to hop across the country. So I just went Walmart to Walmart to Walmart to Walmart, sleep in parking lots, even ran out of gas on the way there. I had to wait for a payment to come through. So so that's kind of where the confidence in myself built. That's when my faith started to build afterwards. And so 7 days later, I made it over there. I met my birth mom. Let's just say if I hadn't seen women in addiction and understood the traumas that women in addiction tend to have, I would not have been able to have so much empathy for her. And so I have compassion and empathy. And generally speaking, you can't have empathy without actually having some sort of intimate experience with, someone based on whatever it's around. And so, with needless to say, it's funny because my last tattoo is blessed. It's like, how do I say this? God saved me. And so my entire perspective and this identity that I had built inside of me since I was a child literally got turned upside down. And I started to see, oh, wow, adoption's the best damn thing that could have ever happened to me. And it's nothing against my birth mom. It's nothing against anybody. She was a victim doing what she knew best to survive. She was abandoned. She was, introduced to drugs, during her abuse. And so like she lost every child after me, so that's the road that she was going to be going down, and God knows that. And so it's funny because she'll talk about it and she'd be like, I just couldn't win. Like I was doing this, I couldn't win. And I'm like, yeah, because God knew. And so it's nothing against you. It is what it is. And that's part of our trials. And so meeting her gave me closure. It kickstarted and boosted literally a whole new leaf. This is kind of rewind. Day 5 of the 7 of driving, I was finally able to get my phone turned back on. And the first call I made was to the Ohio State University admissions. And so I just left to get sober. 5 days later, after coming off IV drug use, I'm calling the Ohio State University admissions to get into college. I had no, this is God, guys. This is God. I had absolutely no idea. I never even considered that. But I kept seeing the Ohio State University everywhere. And so it's just like it just got embedded in my brain. And so the first call I made, or maybe the second call I made when my phone got turned on, was to admissions. And so I ended up getting Kentucky Sunday morning, and Monday morning I was off to the Ohio State admissions. And so even getting to college, I had to fight for it because felons are generally not allowed into a lot of institutions. It's becoming more acceptable now, and they're more like case by case versus just straight, not accepting you. And so I had to fight to get in. And when I started, I was in a homeless shelter. So yeah, we'll just say this. I had to fight to get in. Stuff with my birth mom didn't go good. And so like the reason I'm diving into these details because like this all compounds. Like we are the accumulation of our experiences. And like when we don't get something, we have to fight for it. There's a growth that happens in that. And it's showing God we want it. And so needless to say, I ended up, doing drugs with my birth mom. And so that came a slippery slope. So I left to get sober. Ended up relapsing with my birth mom, and I talked her into it. So that's all on me, nothing on her. And so falling out, the LDS Church helped me move to Ohio since I had the stuff with OSU going on. Still waiting to get accepted and approved. It's during COVID, so communications were kind of they just weren't very very good. And so that was basically the whole next 6 months after that. And so that year of meeting my birth mom, fighting into college, relapsing, starting college while hooked on crack, while living in a homeless shelter, like that is all the foundation of like where I'm at today and what I'm doing, because it didn't come easy. I had to fight for it. And even though I was making decisions that were the same kind I was making before, I had a new element because I'm like, hey, college, 4 years. Even if I make mistakes, as long as I stay on this path, I have opportunity at the end of that 4 years. And so that drove me forward, and that gave me a new forward, a new, how do I say, a progressive forward vision, whatever the words would be for that. So I just had never been able to look at my future like that. And so, even though half of my first semester I was smoking crack, living in a homeless shelter, I was on crutches, waiting to get knee surgery, literally couldn't walk, it's terrible. I would go to this church about half a mile from the homeless shelter, log in and do my classes online, take my tests, do all that stuff since it was during COVID. And so, after doing that for half a semester, ended up getting housing through, a resource for the community, and I haven't touched hard drugs since. And so, so God pulled me out. That's why I truly believe that showing up is half the battle. You show up, God will do things. And that's why taking action is important, because it's like a car, it has to be moving in order to be steered. If you're not moving, how can you be redirected? And so it's just the importance of taking action, taking massive action, et cetera, et cetera. And so, so that's what propelled me forward. College, that element, feeling like I have a future and that I potentially can add value to myself. That did absolute wonders. And so education is the number one reducer of recidivism, which is the rate of reoffense. And so, that changed my life. So molecular genetics, I was like, hey, oh, wow, addiction has predispositions. CRISPR-Cas9. So now we are genetic gods. We can modify genetics from top down. Nothing is off limit, period. So we take this technology and we create solutions around addiction and other, ailments, disorders, quote, unquote, diseases, whatever you want to call it. So that purpose pushed me, even though my purpose has changed and evolved over time, it's always been something. And it's like they say in addiction, you need to have a purpose outside of yourself. And so that's continued to drive me by having a purpose outside of myself that is intimately connected and interwoven into my past experiences. Just like I want my first books to be around adoption, so I can help better prepare future parents make the mistakes my parents made. And so there's just a lot of power. Your message, as we've all probably heard. And so pain equals passion. For me, all my passion is born from pain. And so that's kind of the rundown of that. And I'm coming back to Utah, new mind, new soul, new spirit. University of Utah transfers, which is sociology. And that's when entrepreneurship began, because I'm like, wait, The scientist is the hardest part, and they get the worst payout. They get the worst everything. If you're a scientist, you're one. But if you're an investor or founder, you can bring five in. And so you're no longer just this unidimensional being working towards a goal. Now you're an orchestrator. Now you're bringing multiple, it's a multifaceted approach to solutions. So like if I wanted to do that, then being a scientist is not the way to do it. Go hire the scientists who like to do that stuff, who enjoy being in labs and doing math and equations. And you don't have to do that. And your impact is greater by actually not being the scientist. And so I had a huge perspective shift, started following Grant Cardone, huge component of my marketing journey. Took one of his courses, 10X marketing, dropped out of college. And I was like, got to burn these damn boats. And so been in marketing now for 2 years. It's been a rough road, finally, on a uphill trajectory. We'll just say, yeah. So, how do I say this? Your circumstances definitely do impact your potential. And so it's just like now, I live in Cancun because I couldn't get housing in America. Over a decade, couldn't get it. Came to Mexico. Boom, I had housing in 34 days. And I only looked for 7 of them. And so life's what you do with it. Circumstances don't define you. Your past doesn't define you. It molds you and it shapes you. And so, business for me is about removing the barriers and the obstacles that I had to overcome that I know most people aren't resilient enough or committed enough to overcome, so I can make it easier for the next man. And so that's where all my whys align at. And now I do like cold email / breaking into growth strategies and different components of marketing and in the digital landscape. And so, yeah, it's my story in a nutshell.
Hey, well, I appreciate you sharing and kind of going through it. There's one element that I think we can bring up later, but let's talk about it right now because we'll complete that and then we're going to get into some of this other things. But I think that you went back and you got the government involved a little bit in expunging some things, right? Or getting some recognition. So I think that's a big part of, not a necessarily big part of your story. Obviously, it's a part of your story and the other things happen. But I think that it's also a part of hope that I think I want to help other people understand that there's the hope side of it. So talk a little bit more about that.
So when I was at OSU, I went and did a summer government program where that was a God moment because it was the last day. I just clicked through all these emails. There's 50 options. I picked 5. I ended up on this one that's basically opened up tons of opportunity that I never would have had, period, otherwise. Most people can't get pardons. The truth is 90% of people who are justice impacted will never get expungement and they will never get pardoned because the system is not built for them to get out of it. It's just not how it works. And so ended up interning for the Ronald Reagan Institute. And then I didn't intern. I went out for a government program. I interned for a nonprofit that worked with returning citizens from Washington, D.C. area. And then I left that summer program after 3 months, interning for the Ronald Reagan Institute and Presidential Library. And so right now, I passed the 5 years. So if on my state level, Utah wanted to find any reason to disqualify me, I've now checked all the boxes so they can't be, how they usually do it and deny me. And so I checked those boxes, and then I have a Presidential Institute's letter of recommendation supporting me. And so just think of all the different pardons that they would get or different expungement processes that they would get. Most people aren't going to have those things. And so that's a big part of it. That's for the college. If I hadn't gone to college, I wouldn't have the opportunity. And so now it's the last year. So I qualify now. I started my process. The next thing I need now is a little bit more socioeconomic backing. It's not an easy process. You are more likely to not get approved, period, than you are to get approved. And so, so that's one of my things by the end of this year. I'd like to be able to grease those gears. So I've got most of what I need. It's been over 5 years, got political capital backing me. And even on that, so it's just,
Millions of cats and dogs are euthanized every year because there simply aren't enough homes. At the Animal Alliance, we're tackling this issue head on with accessible spay and neuter services. Your support can help us save lives. Visit theanimalalliance.org to learn more about how you can contribute. Together, we can make a difference. One of my things that I want to do in my life is help in my business plan or in my life plan. I call it homeless individuals, right? Not everybody's homeless who has these difficulties, and not everybody who has these difficulties wants to change. So there's a lot of people who they aren't really ready to change, they aren't really ready to become any different than they are. And I hope one day you get to meet and see Ty, because he's not somebody that most people just walk up to and talk to because of things that have happened in his past. He's got tattoos everywhere, which is, it doesn't matter. But like, the thing is, his smile is the most welcoming smile. He's the most sincere, loving person. We've had him over to our house. Like I have no problem having him around my family. And I mean that sincerely because of who he is, not of all the stuff that happened behind like who he was, but who he is. And I met him probably, again, 2 or 3 years ago. So he'd already kind of moved past a lot of this stuff, although still going through a lot of self-discovery as a new man. And I just think that understanding the whole process and understanding kind of where you're at, and then what options are available to you or not available to you because of circumstances. I think anytime we can be around people that do change, it helps us as a society believe that change is possible a little bit more. There's so many people who just don't think people change. They're like, they're just how it is. And unfortunately, most don't change and most don't want to change. And so it gets reinforced by the fact that what's happening in front of them actually reinforces their current beliefs. And it takes a special individual like yourself to continue to believe that you can change, even though all the odds are against you. But also that comes from the support around you of people who believe that you can change and see that you can change and see what's inside of you. I was listening to a book by John C. Maxwell, and one of the things he was talking about is he goes to visit the statue of David that was carved by Michelangelo in Venice, Italy, like every year or every other year. I forget how often he said he went. But point is, the quote is basically that the statue of David was always inside that rock. It was just Michelangelo's job to carve away all of the excess stuff that wasn't the statue. So it wasn't like he created the statue. The statue was already there. He just had to clean it off a little bit and increase the definition. And I think the same way with people who choose to change their life, it's already inside of us. We just have to get the right environment and the right people to help see what's inside, even though everybody else just sees a rock, but he saw David. And then he showed everybody David after he saw it in his mind. So taking that into application here, I want to talk about a few different aspects of your story that I think are relatable to anybody. Because sometimes when you hear stories like yours that are very stark, and like, I don't know that many people, I probably know some that I don't even know I know them, who are addicted to hard drugs, right? That are addicts. However, I know a lot of people, myself included, who are addicted to my cell phone, who are addicted to, and I say this, I was listening to another podcast. They're like, look, if you can't touch your phone, or you got to carry your phone around with you just to be, there if something does happen, that's an addiction, man. You should probably break that. And I think that that's hard for me. Like I recognize that it's hard for me to not have my phone with me all the time. And so how does that disrupt my relationship with the people around me? How does that disrupt my relationship with myself? How does that disrupt my relationship with God? So I think that this is going to come out weird, but I think we should normalize addiction, not normalize and just say, okay, we're all addicted. Like it's okay. Not normalize the okayness of it, but normalize the stigma of it, so that like we aren't feeling guilt and shame around it. And releasing that guilt and shame allows for a lot of growth. So talk about that process of really deciding it was the last time. How did you get rid of the guilt and shame and the imposter syndrome? Because obviously that's all still part of your past. You probably have certain tattoos that, whether you like it or not, like they remind you of certain experiences of when you got it and the type of life you were living. So how did that mindset shift to where you were able to give yourself the grace that you needed to actually move past it?
So like when I was sharing too, just like that experience. So it's no coincidence that I was forced to go through difficult choices with difficult options. Like I said, I turned $13 into almost 2,000 miles in 7 days. And then when I met my birth mom, I relapsed. And then when I got into college, I was in the homeless shelter and I was hooked on crack. And so, how do I say this? If it weren't for those difficult times that I had to find a way through, I wouldn't have necessarily, like, I can't say any otherwise because that's just how my story is. But I feel that I wouldn't have been able to create a new identity because they compounded on top of each other. So, like, even though I ended up relapsing in a different situation, I now had experiences that reinforce new identities of myself. So it's like, basically, it's like, don't tell yourself you're something, prove it to yourself that you are X, Y, or Z. And do that consistently, do that daily, and be conscientious of it and be intentional with it. And so at the time, I didn't understand why I was doing the things I was doing. And as I started getting into the educational world, started, like I said, like it's just crazy how dumb I was. Like I had an intelligence level, but I didn't have much to accommodate the level of intelligence that existed inside of me. And so I had to go on a self-discovery. I had to learn why I do the things I do. I've read so many self-help books. I have dove into all sorts of different things relating to my experiences to understand. And so it's like right now, I give myself the most grace because I'm like, man, it is a miracle that I am where I'm at. Even though I'm not where I want to be, just being where I'm at is literally a single digit statistic. And that's going against incarceration, foster youth, addiction, all these different things are stacked against me. And so that's kind of where I give myself the most grace right now. But I'd say discovery of the causes and the different psychological aspects of, why I did the things I did. The most important key piece of, grace of myself and just understanding is when I studied sociology. So even though I dropped out, I can now tell you why like you said before, that people doing the same things, they're not changing, keeps getting reinforced. Well, what's happening is basically the science of social behavior explains why they keep doing the things they're doing. And there are legislations and policies and systems that are literally built to manipulate and almost guarantee, based on the statistics, failure based on social science aspects. And so so I mean, it's just a mixture of all of that. But I mean, most importantly, it's like once you realize how manipulated you were into failing, and you realize that Uncle Sam, yes, Mr. Uncle Sam, has been meticulously intertwining traps and human behavior based tripwires and all these different things in your path. Let's just say you get a little fired up. You're like, oh man, this was intentional. It's no coincidence that 77% of people return within 5 years and 44% within one. I can literally break it down, and it's all based around the science of social behavior, so sociology. And so they basically take Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They make legislations targeting each different level. They ostracize you. So it's like the 1, 2, 3, 4th level. So like they just do all these different things, and it's literally law. They use law to trap and oppress sick people. And over 50% of people incarcerated are there for addiction-related issues. But their environment would never cultivate change. If there's 5, you'll be the 6th. Doesn't matter what you give. You give one of them all the information they need, but all they're around is this completely contrastual 5. They're not going to be able to implement. They're not going to be able to implement it and integrate it. It's just statistically, you're not going to be able to do that. It happens, but it just gives me a whole new insight on like why I couldn't change, how my environments, how prison, even like halfway houses and all these different things, they're traps. They're traps.
What do you feel is the incentive to keep people in the trap rather than allowing them out? And I'll answer that one first, and I'll ask the second question. Imagine a world where every pet is wanted and loved. The Animal Alliance is making this vision a reality by focusing on spay and neuter programs to control the pet population. You can be part of this life-saving mission. Visit theanimalalliance.org to find out how you can help. Every little bit makes a big difference.
So it's money. The prison system is a business. Think about it like this. If there are privatized prisons, that means it's profitable. Why would someone go, invest money in a private prison if it wasn't profitable? So the fact that the prison system is privatized is a huge red flag that something is amiss. And so taxpayer dollars, think about this. The legal system it's evolved from slavery. So it went slavery, 13th Amendment, convict leasing, and that's where racial profiling started. And then once they abolished convict leasing, which is where they would lock you up and rent you out to businesses, so just a different evolved form of slavery, they went to the war on drugs. And so the war on drugs is when the system, more like an expansion plan, because it's like, hey, instead of monetizing a race, we can monetize basically a demographic. And we would call this demographic social undesirables. Because if you have money, you can get a felony removed. So once you do your time and you get out and you're a felon, now it's a socioeconomic filter. So anyone with money, just like I was walked up with Rod Blagojevich, governor of Illinois, who auctioned off Obama's senator seat, got a whole insight into how corrupt the political system is straight from the horse's mouth. Just like 6 months later after he got out, same federal prison I did, pardoned. And so anybody with connections and money can get their record removed. So it's about money. It's a system. There's a lot of businesses that profit, even just like transportation, take people to court. Like those are ran by businesses. Like there's so much money flowing through those, and it's taxpayer dollars. And so it's just the best way to look at it is it's an artery. And it's literally America is built on this artery because it's an evolved form of slavery. It's just evolved to match the times. So they're really good about it. And just to give you context, it's just like when they talk about like locking violent criminals up, you'll never hear a politician talk about the statistics that over 50% of violent crimes are alcohol related. So they're not worried about anything that is a root cause. But then you look at who's financially supporting their campaign and getting them into office. Big alcohol, big tobacco, big pharma. All these people are greasing. So lobbying is legal bribery. And so what is it, like 0.5% of America donates more than $10,000 or more to a campaign. So that means 0.5% of America runs America because that's who they owe and who they're tailoring their policies and their legislations to. So people just don't understand the truth of what's actually happening. But hey, go Brandon.
Oh, Brandon. Yeah, I think that it's a fascinating thing. I think that we believe similar things. Obviously, you have more education, both going through it yourself. So then my next question is, because I'm not going to refute anything you said, I actually believe it all. So, but how do these people who fall, for lack of a better word, fall into the judicial system? Take the guy that you just mentioned who, he was in a higher position, had money, but he still ended up into the same prison. Yeah, he got out. Yes, he could pay his way out, but he still went in. So what's the incentive or the pathway for people to put not just the undesirables in there, but still let other people fall into it?
Well, you look at the statistics. So there's people who have the free federal defenders and the people who have paid attorneys. Dramatic difference in incarceration and conviction rates. So I don't know off the top of my head, but huge contrastual differences. And it's just like, how do I say this? If you're able to afford bail, you're less likely to get incarcerated, and you're also less likely to end up with a charge. So people who have money, they have more opportunity. Obviously, not everybody gets out of it because, how do I say this? Number one, you have to make points. But number two, you just look at the statistics. It proves that if you have money and you pull on those levers, you're less likely. But even if you do, you can get out and you can wipe it away. So it's no longer a life sentence. It's just a sentence for why you're incarcerated. But then the tens of millions of other people, so 1 out of 5 Americans has a criminal record. And most of the other people, they can't get those taken away. And there's so many stipulations based on, what crimes it was, how many crimes you have, et cetera, et cetera. Most people can't get them expunged. They just don't qualify. They're not built to let that many people out. So, it's just like with everything, it's not definitive, but if you look at the statistics, the statistics don't lie, the numbers don't lie. And so that's where the truth is. So just like in business, the numbers don't lie. Your feelings lie, your biases lie, but the numbers never lie.
Yeah, it's such an interesting situation. I'm glad I've never been, other than to visit to see other people, but I've never actually been in there, and I'm grateful for that. Let's talk about we'll call it the drug system, because I feel like right now there's still a lot of places that have like a lot of states and even federally they're changing things, deregulating, or people who they actually are not even sending them to jail for anything at this point. There's certain states that have basically said, no, we're not participating in that. Do you see that as a positive thing or a detriment to society that now they aren't getting I still don't think they're getting the help they need, but they're also not removing them from society, which is increasing the danger of society potentially. So yeah, what are your thoughts?
I mean, that's a tough question because, like you said before, some people just don't want to change. And it's like this: if you have a dog and it goes to the food bowl and you knock its nose 50 times in a row, how likely is it to come back that 51st time? Far less likely than at the beginning. And so a lot of these people that are in these systems and they're trapped in addictions, that's like a metaphorical way to visualize their life. Different things that they tried to do, different opportunities they tried to take advantage of that they were denied, et cetera, et cetera. So their identity is low, their self-value is low, their worth is low. They're burned. Maybe they hit that point where they just burned too many brain cells. And so that's a difficult question. It should be decriminalized. And I mean, it should be decriminalized to a degree because, like, I know people who just had a possession doing 5 years. And when you understand how the prisons work, they have to have X amount of beds filled to make X amount of money to cover X amount of overhead. If you go into a courthouse, they literally have call centers to collect money. So we'll just say that law is more heavily oriented towards money because that's required. So it's a business. Then I would say law and order. I mean, that's why there's money and fines attached to absolutely everything, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, it's still a subjective area. But I mean, there's lines. You have to treat people. So problem with rehabs is they take a cookie cutter approach. So I literally changed my life doing everything everyone says not to do. And so I'm just proof that this cookie cutter mentality is part of the problem of why success rates are so low. And so just because you don't criminalize someone or lock them up, if you're not actually giving them the opportunity that is tailored for them, if you're not building solutions around the individual instead of, your next election or your next whatever it is or whatever the heck it is, you're going to continue. It's just like in cold email. The more you personalize, the better results you're going to get. And so the more generalized you are, the less results you're going to get. And so, I mean, it's almost the same concept. And so problem with a lot of these, rehabs, halfway houses and all these things is, number one, you're the product of your environment. It's good to be able to connect with people on similar struggles, but that doesn't raise your average. And so that's one of the biggest problems. That's why sociology is just so important in this discussion, because environment matters, averages matter, who you're around matters, monkey see, monkey do. Certain things only go certain far, but the systems and the processes built to help these people are not formulated to transcend. It's more like a plateau. So think about it like this. Even if today I were to fall back 20%, I'd still be above this. But most people never break above this. So if they fall 20%, they hit their slope. So I'd have to fall all this to even hit my slope. So I'm basically clear. But most people, because they follow these systems and these processes that are put in place and have been normalized, like, for example, NAAA only has a single digit success rate. Like, why are we not reforming these different systems that exist when the numbers don't lie? But that's neither here nor there. It's not my fight. But so that's my answer to that. It goes so far, but how you treat people has to be tailored to them. Just like, one of my first cellies in max in 23-hour day lockdown. So part of my 3.5 years, my first year was 23-hour day lockdown. Almost broke me until I figured out how to wield my mind. And then my second year was 21-hour day lockdown. And my cellie, my first one I had, he was in the foster system. He was sexually abused in the foster system as a male. And then he ran off at like 13 and lived on his own in the woods and all sorts of crazy stuff until he was, 17. And then he kind of started working and doing some other stuff, but still, he just wasn't educated. He wasn't shown how to live. He didn't have examples. And he ended up there for kidnapping. And then he ended up joining a gang because he had a identity crisis. And so that stuff doesn't matter in these systems. When you go to prison, they don't try and take care of your traumas. I was never once given treatment for addiction while incarcerated. I was actually barred from those programs. And so it's just, when you look at the system as a whole, you look at, if you were to draw a funnel of like, if this, then that. So almost just like, running automations, if this, then that, and or all this type of stuff. If you were to break down the system and the different avenues of treatment and all that stuff, and you were to turn it just like that, you'd be like, this doesn't make any sense. This makes no sense, because where this is ending up is absolutely not where we were trying to go.
Well, unless it's not the publicly stated where they're trying to go, and it's the subvert where they're trying to go. Like, it makes sense if you look at it as a business and money flowing to certain individuals, then it all makes sense, So if you try look at it upside down.
Well, think about this. There's Geo Group and Core Civic. They lobby millions of dollars a year for mass incarceration policies. And they lobby against anti-mass incarceration policies. So just the fact that there are people throwing millions of dollars every year into the hands of politicians should tell you that something is amiss. And like I was saying before, if someone privatizes something, just like they do in the healthcare industry, that usually means it's profitable. So if they're privatizing it, it's profitable. Why is it profitable? We want people to get better and not to come back. Why are we focusing on profits over reformation? And so the best way to put all of this in the justice system and all these things is, it's like a condemned house. If you have a faulty foundation, do you build on a faulty foundation? No, you have to tear the whole damn thing down. And sad part, because the system is like an artery, you can't just pull an artery out and then redo it. And if you cut an artery, it bleeds out. And so it's just not as simple of a solution as when I first got, sober, I thought it was. So like, I've had to accept, I can't change the world. I can't change the system. All I can do is be me, focus on me, and try to have impact wherever I can, because at the end of the day, Uncle Sam wins, as we all know as taxpayers. Mm-hmm. Uncle Sam always wins.
So far, maybe that'll change at some point. Let's transition a little bit. I still have so many questions, but we're not going to talk anymore about those, because I appreciate you, and I want to help you kind of share some other things. So there's two questions I have, and we'll end on these. First question is, if people have been following you on social media, you're kind of going through this realization, right? You've created over the last year an extremely good skill set, lots of knowledge, a great knowledge base, the ability to really impact people. But you also are going through this realization that maybe you've been undercharging or just flat out not charging, trying to maybe prove your services, prove your worth. How has your experiences in your past kind of led you to repeat? Again, this is the reason I'm asking this is because so many people think that it's so different. It's not different. He went through the same cycle in his life, just with a different drug, for lack of a better word, right? A different thing. And it all comes down to, what's your identity? What do you believe you're worth? Like, that's the conversation we're having right now. So talk about that, and what helped you realize, man, I'm going through the same cycle again. Like, what was that come to Jesus moment?
That was an important moment. So just over a year ago, like 13 and a half months ago, I literally failed in entrepreneurship right into the homeless shelter. And so what it was is my limiting belief on value. And so think about it. I'm in prison. I'm getting paid. Like, I'm excited to make 15 cents an hour. And so like, you got to think about this. So on average, a felon, someone gets out of prison, they make $14,500 their first year out. That's the average. And so I had all these limiting beliefs about my value. You have to think of just kind of like when you feel stomped on, when you're just all these different things accumulate into how you view yourself. It's like, hey, if I can't do this, 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 and this, how could I be worth this? And so once I failed into there, I consider a mentor took me in, and I helped him with his, co-working space and some other stuff. There was a pivotal moment. I was doing some copywriting stuff for still a very dear friend. She's absolutely amazing and awesome. She had to harass me just to send her an $850 invoice. Like now I'm sending out like 6,500. Like I'll charge anyone anything now if I see the value. If I think I can get it, I'll charge it now. But before, like just the thought of asking for $850 for absolute, intensive work, skill-based work, I was basically accumulating information without implementation and monetization. And it's because to me, it just didn't make sense. And so I had to break through that. I had to literally lose everything and start over yet again to finally realize, oh crap, like there's something wrong here. And so God works through people. If she hadn't hired me for that specific job, she literally harassed me to send her that invoice. That was a point where I was like, oh wow, like I can charge, I can do this. And so let's just say I can see why a lot of people struggle with breaking through is because we don't see these inner dark webs of limiting beliefs that have been embedded into them. Like just for context, when I was in Supermax, just going back to Max in prison, they leashed me up. Anytime I'd come out once every 72 hours for 45 minutes. And they have a lot of their population in this kind of environment. And they would leash me just to go to the shower and just for my 45 minutes out. And so just have to think of the compilation of these kinds of experiences and traumas and how they, how do I say it? They overlap with identity. And so even though I was out of the drug world, I was still wired based on my previous experiences. And so entrepreneurship has literally just unlocked, first education, then entrepreneurship. And it's like, once you get sober, you're like, oh, wow, like I just did this. And it's like, okay, if you want to take that to the next level, jump into entrepreneurship because then you really learn a lot about yourself. And so, I love that question. I love that question because that was my biggest barrier. That was my biggest barrier for a year. I didn't make diddly squat. And so as soon as that got unlocked, 2024, I made more money than entire 2023 combined in just 90 days. And so it's just been obviously have more skill sets and more value to add. But that limiting belief was destroyed, through community. And so God and community is kind of my mantra, my motto, because God works through people and people open doors for people. And business is about people, not products. And so, yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I just think that we're all struggling in some way with some type of limiting belief, and it's holding us back based on our prior programming. And unless we're willing to really identify that, understand it, not shame it, not guilt it, not anger it out of ourselves, motivation will work a little bit. You can beat yourself up to do something for a little bit, but long-term, beating yourself up is a death trap, I believe. And if you really want to move past something, you need to love, understand, have compassion for those elements of who you are. And so it's something I've seen over the years that as you've gone through your journey, you've been very good at doing and holding space, not just for yourself, but for other people who maybe you feel have done you wrong, but also still understanding, hey, is this the right solution? Just throw them into the deep end there. So this is the final, we're going to end on this, but if somebody what is it that you do to help people? And then if somebody wanted to work with you or wanted to learn more about how they could benefit from your services, where would they go to get in touch with you?
So cold email marketing, AI, hyper personalization, and hyper targeting has been my bread and butter as of late. And so that's just mass cold outreach. And so basically how do I say this? I have a very particular ICP in who I'll do done for you with, but I have a much broader done with you / do it yourself coaching consulting kind of a model. And so for done for you, revenue minimum 7 million. From now on, marketing agencies or agency models are done for you models only. And you have to have a 5-figure or higher ticket in order for me to do done for you. And then when it comes to teaching the processes, the tech stacks, the systems, the strategies, that's basically, how do I say it? It's applicable to most businesses if you want to do cold outreach. At the same time, it's like how do I say this? When I wasn't charging people, I was learning. And so that whole year, over the past 2 years, I basically become a growth strategist, whether it's something I did, whether it's things that are associated, things that I was doing with other people, whatever it is. So it's kind of a grayer area in a sense, but kind of, how do I say this? I'm hitting more of a broader approach to lead generation and growth alongside of, cold outreach, because cold outreach, it's never going to die, but it is evolving. And so that's what I do. We get pretty complex with it. And so to find me, Facebook, Ty Shane, LinkedIn, Ty Shane. I have 2 emojis in my name. And or shoot me a text, 801-232-9699 for anybody watching this.
Yeah. And he's
even if it's because you have a loved one who's struggling from addiction, that's something that I in another life, if it was profitable, and maybe it'll be like a philanthropic thing, I can take anybody. I haven't tested it, but I understand transformation. I understand how to tailor and how do I say this? Ignite a fire in someone based on, passions and things they're interested in. And how do you navigate a path that whoever does overcome these obstacles and barriers, they generally have a more personally tailored strategy around it. The ones that make it, there's some patterns, and it's not a cookie cutter approach. So in another life, I wish I could just do that all day.
Hey, well, it's a process. I think in a lot of our lives, we have multiple lives, we have multiple legacies, and I think a big first step is getting the financial resources to have the FU money. To reality, you need to get there. And some people shame it, the system's made for people with money. They shame that as if it's a bad thing. And I'm not saying it's a good thing, but if you know that, then the only person who's hurting you is yourself for not getting money. If you know the only thing that can hurt you is not having money, and the only thing that can save you is having money, why would you spend any time not getting enormously wealthy? Because then that's where the freedom is. And it's not because you want to be money. It's not because you want to have money. It's not because you want to be rich. It's not about being rich. It's about having freedom. And if the current system that we operate in is financial, then we need to operate financially. That's a very simple solution. Go do something that's going to be profitable and going to benefit the world, not just something that's going to be profitable. There's lots of things that are profitable that are not good for society. And so, doing something that is profitable and makes sense and can contribute, there's nothing wrong with making money. There's nothing wrong with being profitable. So anyways, I could go on. We could talk for more hours. In fact, if I would be okay if you scheduled another time to get on the podcast, Ty, because I do have a lot more questions than I got to even ask. But go follow him on social media. He's always posting very helpful content, but also just questions. He posts a lot more than most, which is good. But questions about helping you kind of think about your life, think about what are you doing, why are you doing what you're doing, what other options are out there. So go follow him on social media, and then reach out if you have any need for his services. I'm sure you have need for his services, so reach out to him and see how he could benefit you. Thanks a bunch, Ty, for coming on.
Later, thank you.
Yep. We'll catch you guys later on the Fuel Your Legacy show. Preventing pet overpopulation is the key to ending pet euthanasia. The Animal Alliance is committed to spay and neuter programs to save lives. Visit theanimalalliance.org today to support our mission. Together, we can ensure that every pet has a chance at a happy, healthy life.
Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me, and if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.